specifically instructed Linda to play until I got this thing on my big head. It's designed to fit Tyler in his peanut head, and mine is much larger, so it takes a moment to get it adjusted. If it falls off, you'll know I didn't do a good job of that, and I apologize. Thank you again for the opportunity. I don't take this lightly. I enjoyed this time together. I had to run Rodney out of town. Didn't think he was ever going to leave again. But luckily, he and Miss Donna are taking a much-deserved vacation. They're all out of town for a few days. So I get the privilege of standing up here before you today and trying to do my best to talk slow enough for people to understand and fast enough to get you out in time to be at the line early for lunch. I'm not sure how to do that just yet, but I've been instructed to do both. Linda actually instructed me to do both herself. Drink more coffee, but talk slower. I don't know how to do that. So I'm just going to do the best I can. So you pray for me that I pull this off and that you understand where we're headed today. I want to begin our time together this morning with a little background scripture. Now, this is not our passage for the day, but I think it's important to set the scene for where we're going. Not the main text, but this is in Mark chapter 16. This is resurrection morning. Mark 16, verse 1 said, when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they could go and anoint him. So, of course, they're going to the tomb to anoint Christ. It's resurrection morning, and they're headed there for that. Let's jump ahead to verse 5. It says, when they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side. They were alarmed. Don't be alarmed, he told them. You're looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He is risen. He's not here. See the place where they put him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there, just as he told you. Now pay attention there specifically to verse 7. It says do what? It says, but go tell his disciples and Peter. Notice that Peter gets a special call out there. I don't know how your families are. We've got the holidays coming up, but do you have that one family member that for Thanksgiving you call, you invite your aunt and uncle to come, and you say, oh, and bring cousin so-and-so too? You have to be specific because it's never really clear if that cat gets to join you or not. Okay, that's kind of the way the angel is here with Mary about Peter. Go tell his disciples and Peter, because as you know, Peter's blown it, right? He's done something to deny Christ. So that's kind of the gist of the story where we're going today. We're going to talk about Peter. We're going to talk about restoration, being restored when we blow it, restored by his grace. Who's seen this movie before? Anybody? If you're a millennial or you have children that are millennials, you can't miss this, right? This specific scene, next to Bambi's mother dying, is the saddest scene in all of the Disney movies, right? It is. This puppy's little cub, Simba, thinks his father's died. And what does he think? Simba thinks that his father is dead because of something he's done, right? Now, he doesn't see the behind-the-scenes stuff. We saw Scar throw him off in front of the stampede, right? We saw that, but Simba didn't. So in Simba's mind, he's disobeyed his father. He's done something bad. He's been disobedient, and as a result, his father has been killed. So that's where he's at now. That's the picture you see before you. Now, what does Simba do? You can't believe I'm doing a Disney movie, right? What does Simba do? Same thing we all do, right? When you blow it, you mess up, you run away. He hightails it and gets out of there. Now, his father's shown him the kingdom. This is our kingdom, but that shadowy place, that dark place over there, that's not our kingdom. You don't go there, do you? So what does Simba do? First thing, heads to the shadowy place, right? Same thing we all do. Now, let's be fair. Simba didn't exactly leave there and head for the ditches of sin and cesspools of iniquity, did he? No, he goes and finds him another jungle. He makes some friends. He learns a cool, annoying song, Hakuna Matata. Right? I mean, he's not doing anything that we would call immoral, but his decisions have taken him miles away from where he's supposed to be and a world away from who he's supposed to be. He's not fulfilling his destiny, all because he's running from the mistake that he made, or at least in his mind he thinks he's made. And that's where we find many of us today. It happens all the time. We're from Cherokee County. Susan and I both are from Blacksburg. But coming across the river is a different world. Just is. And don't laugh, because there's as many here from Blacksburg as there are from Gaffney now. We've equaled the playing field, guys. It's a different world. I've been here, let's see, the second Sunday of September, we will have been here 10 years. I can't believe that. It's been 10 years that we've been at this church. I never meet anyone from Gaffney that doesn't say one or two things to me. We introduce ourselves, and they always say, what do you do, and where you, okay, I'm on staff at West End, and they always say, oh, I used to go to West End, or my children went to the daycare. Okay, it's one of the two. It doesn't matter 99% of the time. And in my mind, I start to think, well, why aren't you still there? Where'd you go? And I always say, well, come back home. Sometimes it doesn't end well because I don't know why they left. I don't know what's happened. But sometimes, you know what? They pulled a symbol. They've blown it and they've taken off. They've hightailed it out of here and headed to the shadowy places. And we see that all the time now. Now, let me get ahead. What does all that have to do with Peter? Let's take a look and see. Let's go ahead and read our main scripture passage for the day. We're going to be in John now, John chapter 21, starting verse 1. And I turned around and someone asked me last time, why do I turn around and read the screen? I hate to be read to. Is anyone else that way? You hate to be read to? Susan always writes and has, let me read this. I don't like that. I would rather read. So I don't like to read to you. I want to read with you. So if I turn and look this way, I feel like I'm reading it with you. So let's read our scripture together, and I'm going to read it with you. It says in John 21, verse 1, after this, Jesus revealed himself again to his disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. He revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael from Cana of Galilee, Zebedee's sons, and two other of his disciples were together. I'm going fishing, Simon Peter said to them. We're coming with you, they told him. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Verse 4, when daybreak came, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not know it was Jesus. Friends, Jesus called to them, you don't have any fish, do you? No, they answered. Oh, no, I tricked them saying, no. No, they answered. Cast the net on the right side of the boat, he told them, and you'll find some. So they did, and they were unable to haul it in because of the large number of fish. The disciple, the one Jesus loved, y'all know who that is, right? The one that Jesus loved? It's John, the guy that's writing. John, or the one that Jesus loved, said to Peter, it's the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he tied his outer clothing around him, for he had taken it off, and plunged into the sea. Since they were not far from land, about 100 yards away, the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish. When they got out on the land, they saw a charcoal fire there, with fish lying on it, and bread. I thought this was. All right. So let's go back. Here's what I like to do. I've read the entire thing to you. Now let's go back and just take it verse by verse. Take it verse at a time. Kind of unpack it and see how it applies to us. I don't know who this lesson is for today. I don't know what this message is for or who. But I know there's someone, and I know this. If you're a Christian, you've blown it. You pulled the similar. You've done what Peter's done. Let's go back to verse 1, Malie, and we'll undo this one at a time. Verse 1 and 2. There we go. The 7 disciples listed are waiting in Galilee. Why are they waiting in Galilee? Because that's what the angel told Mary to tell them to do. Remember, the angel said, tell the disciples and Peter. So they're waiting in Galilee on Jesus, just like the angel had instructed. They're at the Sea of Tiberias, which is the Roman name for it. If you look it up on your map in the back of your Bible, it will probably say the Sea of Galilee. It's the same thing. They're at the Sea of Tiberias. And look in verse 3. Peter says what? I'm going fishing. For my King James brethren, it says I'm going fishing. I don't know why it says it that way, but it does. Peter says, I'm going fishing. Now, is there anything immoral about fishing? This is where we participate. Y'all talk to me. I'm not going to be a just talking at you. All right? Is there anything wrong with fishing? No. But for Peter, what does this symbolize? He's going back to his original life, right? He's headed back to where he started, where he was when Jesus found him. He's going back to what's comfortable. He's been out of his comfort zone and it's been a little uncomfortable and done some really crazy things. And now he's going to head back to what he's comfortable with. Nothing necessarily wrong with fishing, but for Peter it symbolized that he'd given up on what he'd been called to do. He's dejected over his failure. Now what was his failure? We all remember the story, right? He's denied Jesus 3 times, even though Jesus told him, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. Don't you hate that? Kids, when your parents tell you you're going to do something and then you do it, Patrick? Hate that, right? He said it never happened to him. Well, that's what Peter's done. So imagine how he feels right now. Because he's done exactly what Jesus had told him he would do. And remember the story right after the Lord's Supper? When Jesus has described what's going to happen, how he's going to have to die at the hands of the Roman soldiers. What's Peter do? He bumps up, bows up to Jesus and argues with the Lord. Says, no, you can't do it. You're not going to do that. I'll fight for you and I'll be the one for you. And yet, even though Jesus told him he would deny him 3 times, he still made that mistake and did that. What else happens here? Leave the scripture up there for me. On top of that, what happens? His decision to return back affects his friends, doesn't it? What do they say? We're coming with you. So when we mess up, when we do something, I like to say brain dead and stupid. Maybe I shouldn't say that in full picture, but that's what I call it. When we make those types of mistakes, we rarely do it in a vacuum, right? We usually take our friends with us, and that's exactly what happened here. He affects his friends, and they say, hey, we're coming with you. Your testimony is the life you live after receiving Christ, and it always affects others. But in a sense of poetic justice, what happens? They don't catch a thing, do they? They're out there overnight, and they bear no fruit, just like their lives have borne no fruit before they met Jesus. Look at verse 4. At daybreak, a voice from the shore calls to them. The voice says, friends. Now, I love my CSB translation, and some people wonder why I love it. I just love it because it's new and because it hasn't picked a team yet. Okay, there's no doctrinal references or inferences from the fact that I use this translation, and that's why I like it. But here, I break way with CSB because CSB says that Christ said friends, but I think the word that he used there literally meant children. So he's calling from the shore, kind of saying, hey kids, did you catch anything? But the way he asked, it infers a negative response, doesn't it? He doesn't say, did you catch anything? He says, you don't have any fish, do you? And I can literally hear their response, no. And they don't know that it's the Lord yet, but that's going to be their response, no. I also think maybe Christ had a sense of humor because he always asked questions that he knew the answer to, didn't he? Now, what happened at the tomb? You know, Mary's coming in and he's over there gardening. I don't know why. He's messing with the garden and says, who is it you're looking for? He knew who Mary was looking for, didn't he? He always asked questions that he knew the answers to. Verse 6, what does he tell them to do? Cast their nets on the other side of the boat. Now, for Peter, you think this may have been a deja vu moment? Remember how Peter was called. He wasn't catching anything then either, was he? Jesus said, fish it this way, do it my way, and I'll do what? I'll make you fishers of men. Of course, after he's filled the boat with fish. So for Peter, this is taking him back to where he was called, right? So even though Peter's blown it, he's back now to where he was called. And sometimes I think that's the way we have to do. If you've blown it, get back to where you were called. That's not what we do. We run. We get out of church, we flee, we go to the shadowy places. But really, we just need to get back where we're called. Now, if you weren't called at this church, I don't mean go back to your church. Stay here, but get back spiritually to where you were when God called you. And I think that's what's signified by the fact that Jesus has the fish on the other side of the boat. Think about John in Revelation 2. He also wrote the book of Revelation. He said, in his letter to the church at Ephesus, he said what? He tells them that they've forgotten their first love and urges them to recall the things that brought them in. So just like Peter has to recall where he was when he was called, I think we have to recall as Christians our first love, which is what was signified in Revelation 2 to the letter to the church of Ephesus. When you do something that embarrasses you, embarrasses your God, your church, and your family, and yourself, then you get back to where you were when Jesus first called you, and you return to your first love. Okay? Verse 7. The one Jesus loved, of course, that's John, who wrote the book. John recognizes his Savior on the beach and alerts Peter. When Peter realizes this, he immediately puts his clothes back on. I don't know why he was fishing with no clothes on, but he had a bare minimum clothes in a desert climate. It's overnight, so he puts his overgarments back on and throws himself into the sea. Sometimes when you mess up and you get back to God, it's ugly, isn't it? Sometimes you gotta own yourself and do the ugly thing. In my mind, he throws himself out of the boat to get back to Christ, which once you realize that you've blown it and you got to get back to Christ, you'll throw yourself back. You'll do the exact same thing. I don't think this really matters, but I find this interesting that it says the boat was less than 100 yards away. So I see Peter in there encumbered by all of his clothes trying to swim, and the other guys are like rowing by him. And he's still in the water over there. You know, I don't know why. I don't think it's important. It's just how I envision it in my head. Verse 9. Then, when they reach the shore, they find sustenance in a charcoal fire. So Christ is there waiting to supply their needs, right? Just like he always is. They had fish for breakfast. I've never had fish for breakfast, but if you ever want to try it, if it's good enough for the Lord, good enough for me, we'll give it a shot in this cake. I'm okay with that. Don't miss the significance of the charcoal fire. Fire is mentioned all throughout Scripture, isn't it? It's used to destroy, it's used to purify. Here, it says specifically that they came to the shore to a charcoal fire. Well, that's only specified one other time in Scripture. And where that is when Peter denied Christ. In John 18:18, it says that Peter and the disciples were warming themselves by a charcoal fire when he denied him. Okay, that's the only other time in Scripture that that's specified. So we have charcoal fire used twice. So, I said fire. Charcoal fire. Blacksburg's hanging out, I'm sorry. Charcoal fire. So we have that here. What do you think that signifies? I think it's Jesus' way of saying, look, you're welcome back. You're welcome into my fellowship. I'm here with open arms to supply your needs, but you know, we got to deal with that. Sometimes we have to deal with what we've done, right? We have to face that. Sometimes we like to smooth it over, especially in the church. We want to be a picture of God's grace. We want to forgive people. We don't ever really deal with what had happened. I think that's what's happened here. Jesus said, look, it's just a little subtle reminder that we've got to deal with that. You blew it, and now let's fix it. Let's move on from it. And you'll see how that happens, transpires, goes going forward. When our sin impacts others, I think it's pretty important that we do that. Notice this. Is the charcoal fire off privately? Did Jesus take Peter and say, let's go over here to the fire? No, the other disciples are present, aren't they? So there's some semblance of it being a public dealing with this mistake. Privately you deal with God, and we all say that our relationship with the Lord is private, and it is. But when you've blown it sometimes and it's affected others, it's important that they see you deal with it. So I think that's important as well, that they're all by the charcoal fire together. Let's jump ahead. Let's get to verse 15, and we'll get to the part that we're all familiar with. In verse 15 of chapter 21, let me read it with you. When they had eaten breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said to him, you know that I love you. Feed my lambs, he told him. A second time he asked him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, he said to him, you know that I love you. Shepherd my sheep, he told him. Verse 17, he asked him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved that he asked him the third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Feed my sheep, Jesus said. Truly I tell you, when you were younger, you would tie your belt and walk wherever you wanted. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will tie you and carry you where you don't want to go. He said this to indicate by what kind of death Peter would glorify God. After saying this, he told him, follow me. All right, so let's go back. Let's get verse 15 up there again, Willie, so we can see it. First off, how does Jesus address Peter? By his full name, right? Not by the name that he had given him. Simon, son of John. How many of you parents ever called your children by their full names? They know seriously, right? When I was a kid, y'all know this, my name is Danny Michael. Not Daniel, Danny Michael. I asked my parents, I don't know why. Don't laugh, I'm from Blacksburg. Danny Michael, that's my name. And if we were ever outside playing with my cousins and my mom would come out on the porch and she had this way of biting her lip and she said, Danny Michael, my parent, I'm like, guys, y'all got to go home. I don't know what this is, but it's not good. This is going to be bad. It's kind of the way that Jesus addresses him here. He doesn't say Peter, whom he had told him before, your name's Peter and I'm going to build my church on you, right? He says, Simon, son of John. Gets his attention, right? He says, do you love me? Now, I've been reading a book, and I know that may surprise somebody, but I can read. I've been reading this book, and here's what it's about. It's about the sacred words and how we don't use them the way that they're intended or how they're losing their meaning. And love is one of those words. Love is a sacred word, isn't it? Is it sacred in American society, though? No, we throw that word around like it means nothing, right? Some of you that are on social media, I see 10 and 12-year-old kids telling each other they love each other, and I just laugh. You don't even know each other. You don't love each other. But in the English language, we only have that one word, right? Love. And many of you, you've heard studies that in the Greek language, there's multiple ways of saying love. Okay, there's agape love, which is that love that's the ultimate love, that sacrificial love. Or there's phileo. And when I hear phileo, I think Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. That's how I remember it, because it's a brotherly type of love. It's a friendly love. But in the English language, what do we have? We have love, which is like saying, I love my wife. Well, I love my truck. That's not the same, is it? I love the Gamecocks, I love the Cowboys, and I love my kids. Well, I don't love them as much as I love the kids. But in our language, that's all we have, right? We have the word love. Not only that, but it's become so watered down that I don't know that it carries much meaning at all. And in the book that I'm reading, it basically is just saying that the author grew up in Atlanta in the Bible Belt, and when he moved to New York City, he was shocked that he couldn't talk to church people. He couldn't talk to people in the streets because they didn't know words like sin. It wasn't part of their vocabulary, okay? But we speak our Christianese, that's what I call it, right? We use our church words that only we understand. And they're like dog whistles when we say them, because other church people, they hear them and come, but the world doesn't. So words that I can use like sanctification and grace and love and incarnation and mercy. I was going with propitiation, but I was trying to come up with big words, but mercy's better. If I go use those at Walmart this morning, they don't mean the same thing there, do they? They don't, okay? But to us, they do, and the idea is how we take those words back. And I think love is one of those words for sure. Jesus asked Peter if he loves him. Now, if you just read this in the English translation, then you get that he asked him 3 times. But here's how he asked him 3 times. The first time, Jesus uses the agape form. He says, do you love me? Do you agape love me? Do you love me in that deep sense of the word? And John replies, I love you phileo, which is more the friendly. So it's like a step down, right? He responds that way. The second time, it's the same way. Jesus uses the word agape, but John uses the word phileo, which is a little bit less, a little bit lower love. It's like the difference in loving my wife and loving my truck, right? The third time, when Jesus asked him, he uses phileo. So he gets down on Peter's level. And Peter says, you know that I did, right? I think it's his way of pointing out to Peter the inadequacy of the love that he's possessed, and maybe pointing towards the love that he's going to be required to have in the future, because in just a minute he foreshadows the rest of Peter's life, doesn't he? He asks if he loves him more than these. What's the more than these? That's been theologically debated for 2,000 years now. What's the more than these? Does he mean, do you love me more than you love these other disciples? Or does he mean, do you love me more than they love me? Or is he holding up a fish and saying, do you love me more than these? In my mind, he means all of that. Do you love me more than all of these? Do you love me more than the boat, than the fish, than the disciples, than any of this? Than the mistakes you made, and the things in the past that you've been holding on to? Do you love me more than that? Of course he says 3 times. And Jesus instructs Peter to take care of his sheep. Now who are the sheep? We're the sheep, right? The church. The church are the sheep. It's pretty important that we remember that and being in positions of ministry or I think of Sunday school teachers. We have to remember that they're not our sheep, are they? Okay, they're the Lord's sheep. Some time ago, Pat and I discussed this a few weeks ago. We discussed splitting Sunday school classes. We want to grow and we want to split. We want to grow and we want to split. And he and I are on the same page. No, we don't. I want to grow my Sunday school class, and I want to fill the room up, and I want to do all, I want to tackle and fight hell with a water pistol because we're going to get. They're not our sheep, right? Small groups the same way. Our small groups got bigger and bigger and bigger, and finally last year we split it into 3 or 4, and that was the hardest thing I've ever done. I felt like I was kicking kids out of the house. You guys go away, Patrick. Y'all go somewhere else and do smaller. I hated that, but they're not my sheep. They were his sheep, and that's what Jesus is telling Peter here to take care of his sheep, to tend his sheep. It's easy to lose sight of that when you're in ministry and in positions of leadership. Remember who Peter is. He's the one that Christ had instructed that he was going to build his church on, right? So not only is Peter to share the gospel, his primary concern is going to be that he is going to tend the sheep or lead the sheep, and he's going to disciple the church. And remember this about sheep. They're the smartest creatures on the face of the planet, aren't they? Yeah, sheep are stinking, smelly, stupid, no way to defend themselves. They don't have sharp fangs or claws, or they don't even have kitten claws. They have nothing to defend themselves with. So they have to have a shepherd. They have to be tended. And that's who we are. It reminds me of this picture. We just discussed this in our Sunday school class a few weeks ago when we were in Revelation, but of course John wrote too. Remember the picture, most of you have seen it, where Jesus is standing outside of the door, and the door has no doorknob? You can't get in, right? It's Jesus. Why you can't get in? But you can't get in, there's no doorknob. That's the picture. And I was at Todd's grandmother's funeral a few weeks ago, and Ashby Blakely has that depicted in stained glass behind the pulpit there in his chapel. And I was thinking about it. Have you ever really given a lot of thought to that picture? And I've heard that preached, and I've heard it preached probably inaccurately. That's found in Revelation 3:20. Well, Revelation 3:20 is a letter to what? To a church. To the church of Laodicea. What's the problem with that church of Laodicea? Well, they got money. They don't need anything. They don't have any wants. They're not like us having to beg money to fix an air conditioner in the gym. They're okay. And the Bible says they become lukewarm. So they become lukewarm. And in this letter, in Revelation 3:20, it says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice, I'll come to him and I'll sup with him." And so we've interpreted that in our mind that that's about salvation. I don't think so. I think it's about restoration. I think the church of Laodicea is on the other side of that door, and they're the ones that are controlling it. And Christ is on the outside trying to get in. Because if we're about salvation, he can just kick the door down, right? Which you could do anyway. Some of you parents that have older children that have kind of gone astray, you can relate to that. You feel like you're on the outside of that door, don't you? You can't, there's no doorknob to get you in. Nothing you can do. And you younger parents, I know you're thinking, yeah, I'll kick it down. Let my kid, yeah, kick it down. They build it back bigger and stronger and hide the doorknob even further away. It doesn't work that way. That's the way I envision this. is just like that in Revelation 3 in verse 20. I think in verses 18 and 20, let's look ahead. Look at what Jesus tells Peter about his future. This is what he is foreshadowing. This is the love that's going to be required of him. Verse 18 says, "Truly I tell you, when you were younger, you would tie your belt and walk wherever you wanted." So in other words, you used to be able to do anything you wanted to do, didn't you? Okay? Before I called you on that fishing boat, before I told you I was going to make you a fisher of man, you could do anything you wanted to do. But look at this. He says, "But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will tie you and carry you where you don't want to go." And what he's telling Peter here is, this is how it's going to end for you. Stretching out your hands is a picture of the crucifixion, isn't it? Okay? You're going to be tied up, and you're going to be taken away, and you're going to be crucified and taken where you don't want to go, the same way that I was. Now we hear that, and what's our first reaction? Well, who wants to know that? But to Peter, do you not think that would have been some consolation? That would have been a relief? Because that means he's going to end his life in service. Doesn't mean he's never going to blow it again. But in the end, he's going to be where he needed to be. Back into the kingdom, back doing what he was supposed to do. I think that's some consolation. He's going to be a martyr, basically. So it's the ultimate picture of God's grace and of our restoration. Even though Peter's turned his back on his Savior, the Savior never turns away from him. So here's the questions today, and I'm almost done. So what happens if you're blown? Number one, what you do is you get spiritually back to where you were when God called you. Where was Peter? He was in the ship. He was in the ship when he was called, and that's where he was when he saw Jesus again after the resurrection. You get to Christ humbly and ugly, if necessary. The translation I read says he threw himself, or he plunged himself off the boat. Some translations say he threw himself. To me, that looks way less graceful, and that's what I picture. I picture throwing himself fully clothed to get back to Christ. You have to deal with your sin and repent of it. Peter had to see the reminder through the charcoal fire. And you can experience God's restoration through his grace. Grace is not Christianese, is it? What's grace? We know what grace is. It's unmerited favor. You didn't do anything to earn it. You couldn't do anything to earn it. And you certainly don't deserve it, nor do I. It's free. So remember this. God knows the worst about you, and he loves you anyway. He knew what he was getting with Peter. He knows the best about us, even though others don't. Think about that. He knew Peter's heart, even when the rest of the world saw him as a rebel, including the disciples. So today will be a great day to come to the altar of the charcoal fire and be restored and receive that restoration available through God's grace. Maybe you've known it before, and you just want to thank God for the grace that got you through that. His protection is keeping you from the same embarrassment again. You come to the altar and thank you for his grace. Or last and most importantly, if you've not yet experienced that call that Peter experienced on the boat, you can come today and let's discuss that. And maybe we'll talk about it. Maybe we'll go in the office. Maybe we'll spend some time together. And let's explain that. And let's see if we can get you to that level of grace. Before we close, before we pray, give me about 3 more minutes and watch this video that Blaise will show you.
Grace is God's unmerited favor for us. It is crazy love. And the truth is, many times we struggle understanding it. If you find yourself struggling to understand God's grace, don't beat yourself up. Even the disciples struggled with understanding grace.
Jesus, that you? You're alive! I can't believe you're alive! Okay, I was in the boat and I wasn't catching any fish, okay? But I heard this voice and the voice said, cast your net to the other side. And so I'm thinking, I'm a fisherman, I know what I'm doing, but I'm not catching any fish, you know? And so I throw that net over there, and then a gaggle of fish pop into that net, and I'm going, this is a total miracle. Who could have done that? I need to know who told me to throw the net to the other side. And boom, I look up, and I mean, there is you. You're looking at me on the seashore going, it is I, the Lord, is alive. I can't believe you're alive. This is awesome. Andrew, get out of the boat. Come on.
Peter.
Yeah.
Do you love me?
Yes, I love you. I love you. You're alive. This is so great.
Good, then feed my sheep.
Andrew, get out of the boat. Come on, man. It's him.
Peter.
Yeah.
Do you love me?
I love you. Yes. And I'm so sorry about that rooster clucking. I had no idea what that meant, but I do know I'm better for it, all right? Okay?
Then feed my sheep.
Andrew, I'm smiling, but I'm serious. Come on, get out of the boat. It's him.
Peter.
Yeah.
Do you love me?
Jesus, mere words cannot describe the passion that I have for you. I love you. You know everything. I love you.
Good. Good. Then feed my sheep.
I didn't even know your livestock. And I so like you, though. There's something new about you all the time. That's what I love about you.
Peter.
Yeah.
Do you remember the morning the ladies went to the tomb?
Yeah. We're all in the upper room trying to figure out what to do next, you know, because we thought you were dead. You know, you were dead, you know. We're trying to figure all that out, you know. And Mary comes running up, and Mary's like saying, beehive, beehive, beehive. And I'm thinking, I'm allergic to bees, like keep them out, you know what I'm saying? But as she kept getting closer, I heard her correctly, she was saying, he's alive, he's alive, he's alive. And I'm going, who's alive, who's alive? And she said, she was at the tomb, and the tomb was empty, and she said that there was an angel there, and the angel said, go tell the disciples and Peter that everything is okay, he is risen. And so, me and John, we hightailed it down there, and if John says he beat me, he's totally lying, all right? I beat him, all right, you know? When we get down there, and I'm looking at that tomb, and it is empty, there's nothing in there, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, what does this mean? What does this mean? And John is right there. John is so good at words. He should write a book. He is so good at words. And John said, don't you get it, Peter? This is everything Jesus said he was going to do. And you did it, and it's done. Let's go. This is so great.
Wait, the angel said what?
Go tell the disciples and Peter that everything is okay. He is risen. You've risen. Let's go. This
He
is
said what?
Go tell the disciples and Peter. To the disciples and Peter. You said my name. Why did you say my name?
Peter, that's grace.
No, I don't deserve that, because that night people kept coming up to me asking me if I belonged to you, if I was with you, and I kept denying you left and right, all right? No, it'll take me my whole life to make up for what I did. It was unforgivable for what I did.
No. What I did on the cross was meant to take what is unforgivable and make it forgivable. That's my grace. It's not about you. It's always about me. That's grace, Peter.
Let's pray. God, thank you again for the privilege of being in your house today. Thank you for that grace. Thank you for that grace that sustains us, that's sufficient for all of us. Lord, thank you for the time you spent, Lord, at the cross and paid our debts. Lord, we just pray that you help us to find our way back to you today. Or if there's anyone here that's belonging, Lord, they need to find that restoration available through your grace. We pray that they would search that out today, Lord, and plunge themselves back at your feet. Lord, if there's anyone today here that doesn't know you as their Savior, that needs to experience that calling, Lord, we just pray that we'll be able to help guide them, disciple them back towards you. Lord, we just pray that you would with us during this time of invitation. In Jesus' name I pray. Stand your feet, let's sing.